You're listening to Scribble Talk, a podcast for bid and proposal professionals. My name is Baachu, and with my co-host Ashley Case, we will be sitting down with our industry veterans to share their stories, discuss their career, and learn how to make an impact in the industry. Today's guest is Kathryn Potter. Kathryn is originally from South Africa and started working in bids and proposals in the business travel industry in 2004 when she moved to the UK after a year as an English foreign language teacher in Germany. Most of her career has been freelancing and contracting, and as a result of this, she became an advocate for the up-to-date content and centralized content libraries. When she's not working on content and or not thinking about new ways to organize, her favorite thing to do is spend time with her husband and two young daughters. She likes cooking as a family, going on cycling, camping adventures, watching movies. Kathryn also enjoys being creative, hence the name Creative Fact, and has written, illustrated, published a children's picture book, and has a second book wanting to be completed. Wow. Kathryn is also interested in gardening and that she's hoping to produce all salad leaves for the summer and autumn garden veggie patch. Wow. I'm sure listeners will be curious where you live, Kathryn. She enjoys reading, but don't make enough time for it these days. Her mom keeps telling her that life works in cycles, and she reckons she will get back to it. Definitely, we'll get back to it. Most importantly, Kathryn is also a regular speaker at our APMP events and was also sponsor for the recent APMP UK 2020 awards. So welcome, Kathryn, to Scribble Talk. Great to have you with us.
Thanks very much for having me. It was a real treat to get your message to say, would you like to be on the podcast? So, yes, great start to March.
Definitely, Kathryn, definitely. Kathryn, let's go back to the very beginning. Where were you born? And let's talk about your high school and education.
So I was born in Pretoria. Actually, not in Pretoria. I grew up in Pretoria in South Africa. I was born in Johannesburg and grew up in Pretoria, as I say. And I attended our local high school called the Glen High in Pretoria. At the end of all of that, I thought I wanted to be a microbiologist and went off to university to study microbiology. Decided I didn't like waking up at 4 o'clock in the morning to turn over petri dishes. And it was a bit too black and white for me. So switched and studied language and communications.
Wow, language and communications in South Africa. And what sort of language and communications did you study, Kathryn?
So my family is from the Netherlands, so I studied German as that was the closest I could get to Dutch, and English. And my main interest in English is Old English, the English they spoke way back when we couldn't spell properly. So Old English and Middle English. And then I did intercultural communications, mostly because South Africa's got 11 different official languages and 9 different cultures. And it was just something really interesting to understand how people communicate across cultures.
Totally, Kathryn. So is it Afrikaans that you can speak, Kathryn? Is that right?
So my family is an English-speaking South African family. I studied at an Afrikaans-speaking university. And so I speak both languages fluently. And then of the other 9 native languages to South Africa, unfortunately, I have a few words of most of them, but I can't actually speak any of them properly. The region I lived in studied Northern Sotho, and so I learned a few words of that way back when, and tried to learn Zulu when I was working. Didn't get very far though.
Wow, that's fascinating. You know what? No wonder you love content, Kathryn, and multilingual content. Perfect. So, language and communications as a degree. Then what was the very first job that you took? Professional, not professional, but anything. What do you remember as the very first role?
My very first job as a teenager was selling books in a bookshop. My first real job where they actually pay you a salary, I was an estimator for a timber roofing manufacturer. It happened to be my dad, and he was looking for somebody to help him out. And I said, yes, I'll come. So that was where I trundled off to just after I finished studying, and in about 1996, I think it was now.
Got it. And how was it working for your father in a professional environment?
It's challenging working with family, I'll say that much. I very much believed in what he was doing, so I could support him and wanted to do the things he was doing. and it was great fun to be involved in something with him. But I would warn anybody who's intending on working with their family, leave your work at the door when you come home. Because otherwise all you do is you go to work, talk about work, come home, talk about work, and never have a life outside work.
Well said. Totally, Kathryn. I'm sure many of the listeners are have families that they work with, or husband, wife that they work together. That's a very, very good, solid point. So how long were you there with your father before you moved on to do other things, Kathryn?
I worked with him for a year and a half, nearly 2 years, and then shifted along to one of the major technology and engineering firms in his sector. And so that was 1996, 97, and did a whole batch of things in civil engineering and concrete technology way back when, and then studied to do English as a foreign language and moved to Germany. So there was a big gap between being involved in bids and doing all the other things I did beforehand.
Right, got it. And why the decision to go to Germany?
I speak German, and I had studied German at university and realized that I was never going to be fluent unless I actually went and lived there and worked there. And having studied English as a foreign language, I was really keen to go to Italy. They weren't looking for people to do teaching English when I was looking. So ended up in Germany and lived in what was East Germany, and then lived in West Germany as well. And then moved to the UK after a year of teaching English.
Can you still speak German fully, Kathryn?
Yes, I can. Ja, das kann ich.
Nice, Kathryn. Wow. Okay, so that's interesting. So German Afrikaans is still there, but that's interesting. That's very good. And how long were you there in Germany?
I lived in Germany for a year. It was just from the one December to the other December. I remember leaving South Africa in a heat wave of 35 degrees and landing in Germany in 2 foot of snow and minus 17. And as chalk and cheese. I'd never seen snow before. I was 26. I'd never seen snow.
Got it. I think that's, I can understand. I think we all evolved from where we are to where we are today. And I'm sure that's this beautiful experience that you just mentioned. So from Germany, what brought you to UK, or did you go to South Africa to come back to UK?
No, I came straight from Germany to the UK. I had a friend from school who was looking for a flatmate, and I was keen to shift and see another place, and so decided that I had a friend looking for a flatmate. I'd give the UK a chance, and came over, and off I went, and I'm still here.
Got it. Yeah, so cool. It's Germans lost. So you made the Brexit like 20 years ago. Choose UK instead of Europe. Nice one, Kathryn. So so you came here and went with a flatmate. That takes a lot of guts, Kathryn. You made it sound so simple, but coming from South Africa, moving from your place to, I'm sure, to an entirely different continent, speaking different language, and from there, moving from there to UK. What advice would you give someone who's also, looking to explore languages and cultures at a very early age?
I think the most important thing about languages and cultures is to look at it as a curiosity, as a learning experience, remembering that, and I think this is very important for English speakers. English speakers are very conscious of making mistakes. People from other cultures are less conscious of making mistakes and much more conscious of trying to get the message across. It's important that you go out there, and it doesn't matter how many words you have of another language. If you smile, if you give it a go, just, go out there and have as much fun as you can speaking the other language. Don't worry if you've got the grammar wrong. Chances are people will understand what you said anyway. And just go and experience things. And when you go traveling, don't go and do what the tourists do. Try and eat where the locals eat, go where the locals go. You get a much better feel for an environment and a much better experience that way.
Totally, and much better food as well, right?
Oh, yes. Much better food.
Oh, well said, Kathryn. So, wow, let's go back to where we left. So you came to UK, flatmate was there. And then what did you decide to do in UK after you came?
I ended up doing data capture for a recruitment company in the travel industry. And I hadn't been there for very long when they said, oh, guess what? We think we've found a permanent job for you. I was like, okay, because by this time I'd handed in hundreds of CVs for internal communications and not gotten anywhere. And they had a sales support role at a company that was called The Travel Company at the time. They're now BCD Travel, and they do global business travel. And I ended up there in sales support in 2004. And that was where my career in bid management was born.
Totally. And from 2001, you started to work on bids and proposals. Do you remember the very first bid that you did, other than the one you might have done very early on with your father back in South Africa?
So back in South Africa, bidding was more a case of putting in a bill of quantities in a quotation. There weren't things like insurances and environmental statements and diversity and inclusion and all that sort of thing. So in 2004, when I got to the business travel, to BCD and business travel, and I was faced with our first bid was to a very big legal company. And it was quite a challenge because I'd never been faced with the amount of information that people wanted to know. They wanted to know everything from how many people you had working for you to how you were going to manage an implant situation in their organization with a team of people based at Clifford Chance just to do their travel. And it was like 1,000 questions on something that was like, it's going to cost you so much. Why don't we just tell you how much it will cost you and off you go? So it was learning about the different things that people want to know about, understanding what they're asking behind the question. That good one in bidding where they ask a question, but that's not actually why they're asking the question. You need to understand what's happened previously in other situations that might be a driver for those questions. So from 2004 to 2005, 2006, I worked permanently in bid management. And then I went contracting and freelanced and contracted from 2006 all the way until now.
Wow. So what triggered you becoming a freelancer, Kathryn?
I met a chap who was working in IT, and the IT world at the time was full of consultants and contractors, and everything they did was on a contract basis, and there was just so much more experience that they got to have, and so much more, working at this place and working at that place, different sectors. And I thought, you know what, this is for me. And he encouraged me to give up what I was doing, and off I went contracting. And I've worked at an amazing, diverse amount of places. I worked for a company called VT Communications, who did communications for the MOD and shipping and maritime services. I worked for Siemens IT outsourcing. I've worked for G4S, for CETA, the aerospace people. I say aerospace, they work in aviation with, they do all the fantastical stuff that happens with your baggage when it goes through the airport. And then shifted to technical authoring, and for a few years when my children were little, and then headed to freelancing before biting the bullet and going it alone on content about 3-4 years ago now.
Wow. And do you remember the very first contracting role that you took, and how did you adapt yourself to that?
So yes, it was VT Communications. They were based in Holborn and in Lincoln's Inn Fields. And I remember going for the interview at Costa Coffee. And I was asked a lot of questions about the skills that I had that I thought I could transfer from a non-technical environment to a very technical environment. And it was all about writing and about communication and about understanding and interviewing people to get the right answers for the questions, really. And becoming a contractor was interesting because you were never a proper member of staff, but you were always included. You were as important as anybody else, and you had to work harder than anybody else to make sure that your reputation stayed intact. And that was the hard part. There was no rest for the wicked in those contracting jobs, but great fun all the same.
In this close to 15 years of doing a freelancer, roles, Kathryn. Do you have any memorable effort that you wanted to talk about?
Oh, yes. There's quite a few, actually. I worked on a incredibly interesting project where we wrote a content library for what was then, before it was Qvidian, it was Sant Suite. We did a very large project for that. I worked with some of the guys from Strategic Proposals back then. And I also remember working on a bid for a huge public procurement, and the guys had been engaged on it for about 12 months. And 2 days before submission, senior management decided to pull the plug because of, I forget what exactly it was, but I remember us sitting in the room and we were going through the final review, and there must have been about 15 or 20 of us on the project. And somebody said, "That's it, we're canning it. It's not happening." And it was really, really challenging to say, well, we've spent so many hours of work on this and now you're just binning it, gone. But yeah, that was one of the most memorable ones. And then there's obviously there are other ones. There's working through the night on things. There's how many boxes of pizza you've eaten. There's all those good things that happen in bidding, and handing things in at the last moment, battling with procurement portals. But I think that one where we'd worked together for so long on this thing and then it got canned. It was canned for the right reasons. They did do, it was the right thing to do, but it was still very sad for all of us.
Oh, sorry to hear that. Yeah, that I think every bit teaches us lessons more than what proposals, right? I think as a person, we also evolve and we learn as much as we write. That's brilliant. At what point in your career you chose, what content management, content library is where I need to specialize, Kathryn? What triggered that?
I think it was a combination of having contracted for so many years and being a writer at heart, wanting things to be organized. Picking up bids as you go into different organizations on a lastminute.com basis and being asked to write content or write responses to proposals. And so you ask the people around you, where can I find such and such? And they say, oh, John has got that on his computer. You need to go and have a look and speak to John. Or, oh, we did it in such and such a bid, which we submitted about 2 years ago. Go and look in that folder. And then not being able to find the folder. And gradually, I got more and more frustrated with the disorganization, even though I understand why bidding is disorganized, because you move from submitting one bid to working on another bid that's due in a few weeks generally, particularly in very fast turnaround environments. But it was this sense that people were using information that wasn't necessarily correct anymore, that they were doing themselves a disservice by potentially copying in old client references, that they were doing weird and wonderful things about solutions that had no relevance anymore, that you needed to update things, that you needed to keep things current. And feeling that if I could hopefully bring some sense and sensibility to things like that, having worked on a content library project for an automation system, it was like, we can revolutionize our efficiency. We can revolutionize the way we work and think. We can save ourselves so much time, stress, and midnight oil if we can just sit down and get content to work. And I think that's something that bid people understand, but senior management doesn't necessarily understand.
Totally, Kathryn. Wow. We talked a lot there. So the name of your company, talk it through. Why?
So the Creative Fact was born because I actually wanted to call the company Potted Knowledge, as in potted, a potted synopsis of something short, to the point, concise. And a friend of ours looked at us and said, "You can't call it Potted Knowledge." I said, "Why?" He said, "They're going to think you're on drugs." I was like, really? It's got nothing to do with weed. It's got everything to do with a small piece of content. So we fished around for other things, and I said, well, I like creative writing and I like facts. So let's turn it into, a creative portrayal of factual information that's convincing, that's there to get the message across without being dry and boring. So the Creative Fact was born.
Perfect. Yes. How is it being an entrepreneur?
It's challenging. There are days when you love what you do. There are days when you hate what you do. There are days when you wonder why you're doing it. And somebody I know quite well through mentoring, he's been my mentor for a while, he said to me, you have to have your why. You have to know why you want to do this, and then it'll all work. So he made me write out my whys, and between him and my husband, who also reminds me why and asks me why, that's the way forward. You have to have a why to do it. You have to know what you want to get out of it or give to other people through it.
Wow. Wow. Very powerful. Thank you, Kathryn. So, Kathryn, at what point in your career you came across APMP?
It was 2008. I'd been contracting for a little while, and I'd met a couple of people in the bid environment who said to me, look, if you want to get ahead, you really need to join the APMP. And I was skeptical, but I joined it anyway. And through that, I met, particularly at the time, the IT outsourcing industry was very heavily involved in APMP. Most of the people who worked for any of the big IT outsourcing providers were APMP qualified and or members. And so I joined up in 2008 and was a member on and off. I stopped being a member when I went on maternity leave, and then joined up again a couple of years ago.
Wow. Yes, from 2008 gradually to sponsoring an award for 2020. Can you share any memorable experience, contributions with APMP, including the BPC Europe talk that you did, Kathryn?
Sure. So in 2010, there was a move in the UK to have communities of interest where particular areas of concern could be discussed and people could work on best practice. And I decided that I would volunteer for a community of interest on content, which we must have had about 60 or 70 people involved in it. And it was one of those things where we all wanted the same thing out of it, and we just couldn't get the traction we wanted again, from further up the tree in our organizations. And then when I joined up again in 2015, 2016, after having taken a break from bids after my second child, the move was very much for me to, if I was going to harness the power of an organization that was now very organized and knew where they were going with wanting us to be seen as a profession, I thought the best thing I could do would be to join up with, at the time, Dr. Andrew Loveridge, who I'd worked with for many years. And we decided we were going to tackle the content thing, which is something we're both very passionate about. So our first our first presentation was at the UK APMP conference in 2019. And then we decided to go for the one in Europe last year, March. And I must say, at both times, it was amazing to see just how much people value it when people talk about things they're passionate about, and what we can all do to make things better as a profession and where we're going. And then it was a natural progression to sponsor an award last year, just from a point of view of I was doing something totally different. And I wanted to recognize other people doing things totally differently in their organizations.
Yes, totally, Kathryn. And from BPC Europe, BPC UK Leadership Award, any thoughts on that?
I'd like to be involved again and, keep talking, keep being involved, maybe work towards helping, because I also lectured for a while on the apprenticeship program in the UK, getting something towards really recognizing the value of content in our organizations. I came across an organization that just does information management. And I was like, we so need this in our organization, but just ramping up things. And the more we, as an organization at the moment, we're looking at things like capture. Capture's really becoming important. And you look at the pieces that Bid Solutions have put out recently about the bid life cycle, and you just go, it's so important that we have all the building blocks. Let's really start focusing on pushing different building blocks and making them grow. So I'm all for pushing anything I can on doing content as something important in our organization, as a valued, we don't all need to be bid managers or bid writers or proposal coordinators. How about being a content manager for bids? That for me would be an amazing thing.
Wow, yes, I think everything is evolving faster than what people predicted, Kathryn, and you're right, things are happening very quick. So we So we have few updates on our sides as well. We are finalizing the proposal bots and capture bots in our tech company now. So, so we don't know, maybe the next 2 or 3 years, we anticipate instead of recruiting proposal managers, a portion of recruitment will happen for proposal bots. Hey, I want to have 2 bots, please. So we are gearing up for that. Here we go, hire proposal bots, capture bots. That's what we are going for. But yeah, it's fascinating. Thank you, Kathryn. So we have talked a lot about your career, Kathryn. Let's just talk more about you. So tell us 3 things not many people know about you, Kathryn.
I really like walking, and in 2014 I completed a 100-kilometer charity walk in 23 hours to raise funds for the Children's Air Ambulance, and I'd do it again in a heartbeat, walking that amount of distance. I like sailing, and I actually really enjoy playing Wii with my children.
Interesting. Wow, that's 100 kilometers in 23 hours. That's like 4.5 kilometers per hour. And did you take a break in between, or how did it all work?
The total included the breaks. It was an overnight one. We started at about 10 in the morning in London and walked to Brighton. So there were I estimate I spent probably about 2 hours stopping and changing socks and shoes and eating and taking a break. But it was certainly an experience to walk through the night across the South Downs. It was amazing.
100%, my God. And which time of the year was that?
It was May, the late May bank holiday.
Oh, okay, got it. So
lovely weather.
It could be quite humid as well that time.
It was, and I think we might have had rain overnight. I don't remember anymore. I just remember it being pretty muddy.
Yeah, I can imagine. Wow, that's a long walk. Playing Wii with your kids, have you ever beaten your kids at any game, or they always beat you left, right, center?
When we started playing Mario Kart, I think I could beat them. Right. Just yesterday, I was having lessons in how to play some other Hyrule Warrior game, and they're way better than me now. And I can't play Mario 3D World. I just don't have the coordination. They can totally. Every time.
Totally. My youngest world is Mario. He builds everything, and my eldest is into Minecraft now. And my God, I don't even go there. I know even before I start, I lose. So I just leave it to make them happy. So that's great, Kathryn. So Kathryn, talk us through about gardening and the summer and the autumn, what you're planning.
So we lived in a flat for a long time here in the UK, my husband and I, and then we moved about 5 years ago now to a house with a garden, and we were very keen to have a vegetable patch. So we bought a raised garden bed and decided to plant lettuces, and we had a bumper crop. We did so well that first summer, we didn't buy lettuce or any salad leaves for the whole summer. And last year we were like, no, we've got to do this over the winter. So we bought a cold frame to put on top of our vegetable box. And we had lettuce the whole winter. So this year we're going to go all out and have lettuce summer and winter. Well, that's the plan anyway. And then, I've been experimenting with doing different things in my garden. And gardening is an interesting experience when you start doing it. You have to be very patient. And you have to keep trying new things. It's not something that you can do overnight. Your garden takes 2 or 3 years, and then you might see something that you think you wanted to change, and then you change it. And then if you're doing it yourself, it's very definitely a learning experience, but a good one. Very therapeutic.
Definitely. I was just speaking to Rebecca Link, who heads up the NCA chapter. She's like you, so much into gardening. But wow, okay, that's interesting. And the other part that's completely out of blue here is you have written, illustrated, and published a children's picture book.
Yes.
Talk about that, Kathryn.
So I've written stories for years since I was a child. I wanted to be a journalist. I was going to be a war journalist, and then that didn't materialize because I don't believe in the media being unbiased, but that's a whole nother topic. But I kept this love of writing going. And then when my eldest was a little child, my children are quite close together. So she was probably 1.5 and the baby was a baby. And I used to walk to the park every day and we'd pop them in the buggy and off we'd go. And I used to tell them everything I saw. So I'd say, can you see the bus? Can you see the bicycle? Look at the dog, look at the cat. And out of that, I realized that I had a story for children, and it's called what did you see when you go to the park? Or what can you see when you go to the park? And the whole book is aimed at asking children what they saw, because I realized that so many of the books I was reading to my children were a story. There were no questions, there was no interaction. We were just reading a story together. But that way I felt I could encourage people to read the story to their children. And then the last page is about what did you see when you went to the park? And I had these fantastic ideas in my head about the illustrations I wanted. And I can't draw for toffee, I'll be quite honest. I'm good at stick men, but that's it. And the more I tried to find an illustrator, the harder it got. Until one day somebody said to me, a very respected graphic artist who did a lot of illustrations and advertisements for multinational companies. And he said to me, why don't you just draw your own pictures? I said to him, but Paul, I can't. He said, yes, you can, just do it. So I illustrated it myself with stick people. And it turned out everybody loved the stick people. And off I went. It was self-published, which was also a learning experience. And I've got another one that needs to just be set. I can't do the whole InDesign thing, so I need to get someone to do the InDesign for me. And then I'll publish the next one.
What's the title of the book, Kathryn?
The original one was What Can You See When You Go to the Park? And the next one is When Can We Go Away Again? And that was born out of a holiday frustration from the kids when they said, Mummy, we want to go away again. When can we go to South Africa again to see Granny? I was like, oh no, come on, kids. And so I started writing the story for that and did the illustrations. And now it's just waiting, as I say, for an InDesign person and me to get myself motivated to publish it.
Wow, totally, Kathryn, totally. And these books are available in Amazon, or can we get them?
Yes, the one that is out there is on Amazon. If you type in Kathryn H. Potter, you will find it.
I will add that link part of the episode as well.
I'll ping it to you.
Yeah, perfect. That's brilliant. So that's great, Kathryn. So thanks for sharing that, Kathryn. And let's now enter officially the rapid random fire question round, or what we call Nutters round, in honor of Howard Nutt. So 10 questions, random, no right or wrong answer. Whatever comes in your mind, go for it. Yeah?
Okay.
Perfect. If you got to choose between 50 years of being incredibly happy or to live forever and be a mixed life of both happy and unhappy, what would you choose?
I think I'd do the mixed life of unhappy and happy.
Got it. Any reason why?
My husband has the saying, it's the agony and the ecstasy. You cannot have the happiness without the unhappiness. You have to go through the sad times to really understand and enjoy the happy times.
Got it. Well said, Kathryn. Kathryn, if animals could speak, which one would be the rudest and why?
Oh, which one would be the rudest? I suspect that it would probably be a skunk, simply because they're very, very smelly.
Totally. If you could steal a credit for any great piece of art or a book, which one would you claim as yours?
Oh, it would have to be one of the Van Gogh ones. And there's so many of them. If I could steal credit for all of them, it would be great.
Yeah, totally. Have you ever sent a text message to a wrong person? What happened next?
Oh, yes, I've done that. Well, I was able to extricate myself out of it because it was vague enough that they couldn't really work out that it wasn't meant for them. Happily. A friend of mine did tell me once, if you're ever going to send your mother a text message, make sure you have to type her number in. Don't save your mother in your phone.
Correct. Good point. What was the last gift you gave someone?
The last gift I gave someone was a torch.
Mm-hmm. And who did you present that to?
That was my husband.
Nice. What would the world be like if it was filled with male and female copies of you?
A bit boring, actually.
Mm,
I'm rather predictable.
totally. I think the world will be amazing having that unpredictableness. That's good, Kathryn. What's on your bucket list?
On my bucket list, I would very much like to cycle from coast to coast in the UK, up at the top. And I would also very much like to go on an overland trip across Africa with my children and my husband.
Oh, wow. Okay. Two very interesting trips there. Nice. If Jurassic Park was real, would you visit it?
No, it's too scary.
What's one childhood fear that you realized when you grew up that that's not something that I should have feared about?
Being wrong.
Nice. If your 5-year-old self suddenly found themselves inhabiting in your current body, what would your 5-year-old self do first?
Go and have more fun.
Totally. Are you a morning or a night person?
I'm a morning person.
Interesting. If you could eat only 3 foods for the rest of your life, which 3 food would you pick?
Oh, now that's a tough one. There's a South African dried meat called biltong that is definitely on the list. Cashew nuts and yogurt. Plain yogurt.
Wow, that's a very interesting combination. Wow, okay. I will leave it to the listeners. This is very unique response, Kathryn. Very unique response. That's nice. So we finish the interview and you step outside and you find a lottery ticket for £100 million. What would you do with it?
Oh, £100 million. I would put most of it in the bank, spend some on a few really good experiences with my family. So, for example, that overland trip. And look to find some way that I could find a charity or some sort of foundation that I could help other people who were battling with aspects of their lives, I think. I don't know which aspects, but definitely something where potentially helping women to be more confident and more able to just strike out and do what they wanted to do and not worry that they're going to always be judged for something that they've got wrong. For example, trying to be a mum and run your own business, or any of a number of other things that girls are just like, oh, how can you do that? You're a girl. Well, of course I can do it. I'm a girl.
Perfect. Very interesting. Thank you, Kathryn. So what's something that you have that you consider is a sentimental value?
There is a pocket knife that my dad had that if anything had to happen to it, I think I'd be very unhappy. And the other thing that is of great sentimental value is some stones or emerald stones that were given to me by my mother-in-law from my husband's family, and a set of coffee spoons from my grandmother. Those 3 things, I think, I couldn't live without.
Definitely memorable. Please do keep them in safe places. Yes. So that's the kind of rapid random fire questions, Kathryn. So thank you for that. Who are the people who have been the most influential in your life and career?
There are quite a few. Most influential in my life, and I know it might sound a bit cheesy, is my husband, my father, several people I've met along the way through work and through university. There was a woman in Germany I taught English to who had taken over her father's business, and it was highly controversial at the time, but she did it anyway. She was a great inspiration. A school friend that I caught up with several months ago, she's turned her life around following a cancer diagnosis, and she is really using what she studied to give back so much more in the workplace and helping other people to just get more out of life. Somebody who interviewed me years ago for a sales support role in the aviation industry He worked for Emirates. I can't remember his name. I just remember he said to me, "You should be running your own business. You know far too much about what you want to do with our content." And this was before I considered content as an entity. My dad had a very strong work ethic, almost too strong. He worked and worked and worked, never took a break. My husband is extremely influential because he encourages me no matter what. He's one of those people that it doesn't matter what you do, as long as you talk about it, you can solve any problem. And there's several friends and people I've worked with over the years whose attitude towards life and work is just so unique. My manager when I was pregnant with my second child, who was just so understanding of having small children and working, and he didn't consider it at all an inconvenience that I needed to do the things I needed to do for the one who was in nursery. Those sorts of people who show you another way of seeing the world. Very definitely. There are way too many to count.
Wow, you're blessed with so many people there, Kathryn. So happy for you. So, Kathryn, has anybody asked you, are you related to Harry Potter?
Yes, and in fact, my mother-in-law will tell you she is his grandmother. And the best part is people believe her.
Oh, wow. So the Potter is the surname, is it? Wow, it's a news for me. Nice.
Oh, when we were expecting our children, someone said to us, "Oh, are you going to call them, Harry and Hermione?" And we were like, "No, they're not having any name from the book. It's just not happening."
Wow, that's fascinating. Thank you, Kathryn. So, Kathryn, one thing we missed, which I normally cover in the early sections, is Kathryn. Over the years, Kathryn, I think anybody whom I talk to in content, especially, they always say, "Did you speak to Kathryn?" So what advice would you give someone as a bid manager who's also managing content library? What advice would you give anybody like that?
I would say that the best way that I've come across to manage a content library, if you're also a full-time bid manager, is to block time out once a week, once every 2 weeks, just to look at your content. And also to not be scared to get your SMEs on side and get them to own it. You'll manage it, but let them own the content, because that way you never have to worry it's wrong. And if you can get their buy-in and show them how much time you're going to save them by doing it that way and how much control they will still have over what you're selling, it's a win-win. And then really seriously get your boss on side to get another person to just manage the content.
Thank you, Kathryn. That was useful. We live in this COVID crisis. What have you observed lately that reminded you that people are good?
I think the fact that there's so many people in the community we live in who are willing to help other people. Someone might be going to the pharmacy and asks, "Is there anyone else on the street who needs a prescription picking up?" Or, "Is there anything that we can do? We've got some things we're giving away. Does anybody want them?" Just giving people the opportunity to help and to accept their offers of help, I think, is what really made me realize that people want to help, but you've got to let them help. You can't be too proud to say, "I can do it by myself."
Thank you, Kathryn. So, who's the kindest person you know?
The kindest person I know, there are a good few on my scale. The one is a lady that we have babbled with during this COVID pandemic. She is incredibly kind. She is so thoughtful and just there for people no matter what. My kids, they will always come up to me with something that they will notice that you need a hug, or they will make you a cup of coffee just because they can. And yes, definitely, my husband is an incredibly kind person. He's always there when you need him.
Right. That's amazing, Kathryn. I think people will be looking, who is this husband of Kathryn?
I better warn him, he's about to become a bit of a sensation.
Exactly. We'll hide him from our listeners, Kathryn. It's better for you. So it's great. So what's one personal trait you like the most about yourself?
Oh, gosh. I don't know, really. It's a hard one when you look at yourself and you think, well, what do I like about myself? I think I like the fact that I'm generally thoughtful of other people and try and make things easy for other people as much as I can. Sometimes I'm too nice.
It's good to be nice, Kathryn, and please do continue to be nice. It's great. What's one thing you wish you had known when you began your career?
That bids and proposal teams are undervalued and overworked, and you have to learn to be very strong and have a backbone and stand up for yourself. And the sooner you can do that, the better off you'll be.
Well said, Kathryn. Well said. I think it's super important for us to showcase the right sort of leaders in the industry. The leadership is not churning 2,000 proposals a year and having pizzas and stuff, right? Those times are gone. It's about standing up, saying no to no, and doing, as you rightly said, move away from the sausage factory, and do
Exactly.
something else. It's very powerful. Thank you, Kathryn. What's the best piece of advice you have received, and from whom?
The best piece of advice that I've received. You're never going to be 100% perfect. And that was a chap that I worked with back in 2012. We were working on an enormous NHS procurement, and he said to me, "We're never going to get this perfect. So the sooner you get over it, the sooner we'll be finished." And I said, but he said, "No, we're never going to get it 100% right. We can only get it as right as it's going to be. So leave it be." And I think that's one of the things now, as I work in content, I see so many people want to get it 100% right. It's never going to be right. It's always going to change. You can only get it as right as it's going to be today.
Thank you, Kathryn. So Kathryn, 15 plus years in UK, you have created your own niche in content management, happy family, loving children, gardening, writing, cycling, walking. What's next for you?
If I look at it, I'd like to try and shift towards not just looking at content so much in the bid world, but information management in organizations and how to incorporate that into what we do in bids. I was having a discussion with someone recently and I said to him, "You know what? If you were asking for this budget that you want to rebuild your library and you were asking the head of marketing for that budget for marketing, he wouldn't even bat an eyelid at you. He'd just give it to you." He said, "Yes, I know." I said, "So why can't what are we doing wrong that we can't get bids to get the same budget everybody else gets?" So I think what I would like to see and where I'd like to move things is really getting people on board to understand that bids are just as important as everybody else, and they need systems that work for them, and they need training, and they need resources that are just as much as everybody else gets. And to work towards really getting out there and getting that message across to people. I'm doing it through content initially and understanding how much you can get out of having a good content library. Because I know most of us in bids are fed up with content libraries, and we just want to go back to saving stuff where we know we can find it. Because there's a huge cost of change involved.
Totally, Kathryn, totally. So well said there, well said. Kathryn, is there any part of your life or career, or is there anything else you would like to share in the last minute or two before we close the episode?
I think the biggest thing for me, especially at the moment, is people need to understand that every day is precious, that today you will get today. You don't know when you might not get another day. And really try and put as much as you can into each day. And if you do have a bad day, just accept you have a bad day. But understand that we've only got so many days and we need to get out there and enjoy all of them and really change our thoughts to really positive, uplifting thoughts. Always look for something good in everything and everyone around you and in yourself, because we're too harsh on ourselves.
Well said, Kathryn, well said. So Kathryn, thank you so much for joining Scribble Talk. It's been an absolute privilege to have you with us here. Please do continue to inspire everybody around you. Lots of love to your family, your colleagues, your friends, everyone. Please do stay healthy, stay happy, stay sane. And hopefully, fingers crossed, we will look face to each other very soon.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for inviting me, and thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you, Kathryn.
Thanks, then.
To our listeners, thank you so much for tuning in. Please visit baachuscribble.com/podcast to listen to this episode and check out any of our other previously recorded episodes. If you've enjoyed today's interview, don't forget to subscribe, review, and share the Scribble Talk podcast. We hope you'll check out our next episode where we interview another industry expert and special guest. Until then, it's Ashley Kays,
Baachu Sundram,
signing off.